I'm joined by our current chairman, or chairperson, Yvonne Makolo, who's taken over as chair of the IATA Board of Governors effective the conclusion of the AGM. Our past chairman, Mr. Mehmet Nane, also the chair of Pegasus Airlines, which has gracefully hosted us for these last couple of days, as well as Willie Walsh, the Director General of IATA, and my boss. So good afternoon, everyone. No opening statements. We've had a lot of talking over the last couple of days. We'd like to take your questions. As per usual, if you could raise your hand, and when recognized, please identify yourself before asking the question. And then lastly, it is an industry gathering, so we'd like to have questions about the industry, about broader issues, not about specific airlines. So who wants to ask the first question? Maybe we'll take a question in the front row.
Richard Schuurman, Air Insight, maybe a general one. What is your conclusion of this meeting? What is it, what you pick out of it?
Well, I thought it was a fantastic event. Feedback has been really positive. I think the venue, Istanbul, has excited everybody. You can see the mood of the industry is much more positive than it has been. I think the events at the World Air Transport Summit highlighted the challenges that we face, and I'm pleased in front of an open audience. We're not trying to hide anything. I think we're being very, very open and honest in terms of what it is we have to do. So, we're as an industry, I think, recovering well. A lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of challenges ahead. But we sit here at the end of this event being optimistic about the future of aviation, being determined to address all of the challenges, being totally committed to achieving our net zero target in 2050. And I think united in calling upon everybody else to support us in doing that. We've been clear that we can't get to net zero in 2050 alone. Everybody's going to have to play their part. Governments, regulators, OEMs, air traffic control, airports, you name it. They're going to have to raise the bar to work with us to ensure that we can achieve what is an absolute critical goal. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Where was the most progress?
I think the most progress really has been in, certainly from, and Mehmet and Yvonne can talk about this, but I think in terms of the discussions we've had at the Board of Governors of IATA, which we'll now build on with our members, has been in relation to the measures that need to be taken to get to net zero in 2050. We set out when we agreed the target a pathway to net zero in 2050, one that we believed was credible and could be achieved, a very challenging one and a very expensive one. But I think there's now a greater understanding and appreciation of what we need to do, and recognition that this is going to be extremely tough. So I think we're having very open and honest discussions at the Board of Governors, and I think the industry will benefit from that.
So our feelings first is success and thankfulness, because we have 1,520 attendees and we have to stop the registration because we exceeded the limits of the hotel. This is very good success, as Willie said. It is a really good symbol and it is a good sign of the success of the future of the airline business and aviation in general. And I think if you remember yesterday while we were talking with Willie, we highlighted certain issues such as the SAF and the importance of aviation and how we are becoming victim of the certain decisions which were not under the control and discretion of the aviation, such as the manufacturing of the SAF. And I personally ask your support. And this is something new. I think, can we say, really, that we geared up a little bit for the sake of the aviation? Because we would like to buy everything available there as SAF. We would like to obey all the rules. We are the only industry in the transportation have 2050 targets And in the CAAF conference in November in Dubai, we are going to also talk about the interim targets. And there are other industries which is 5 times larger than us on the carbon secretion, doing nothing. And all the projectors, all the lights are on us. This is not fair. So we talked about this, and we highlighted and asked your support to support on this, to show the world that aviation is doing their homework. Look at the others. Look at the others. I think this is the highlight I can say.
Is it on? Okay. On my side, I think the key takeout is optimism for the industry. We are seeing very strong recovery, so we are very optimistic, but also cognizant of the challenges that we're facing. Willie and Mahmet mentioned it very clearly in terms of the issue of sustainability and the pressure that's on airlines. But the aviation industry has set very, very optimistic and challenging targets. We are all determined to do as much as possible to achieve those targets. But as Willie mentioned, it's not only for the airlines to take on, it's the whole ecosystem that needs to work together for us to meet those targets. A big challenge as well is on the issue of supply chain. I think that weighs heavy on a lot of airlines and how soon we're going to get out of that. But overall, we're very optimistic for the industry.
Okay, thank you. Take a question here.
Hi, Dina Kamel from The National in Abu Dhabi. My question is, the main theme that seems to have emerged from this AGM and indeed the last 2 editions is that SAF is in low supply and other stakeholders in the industry also need to do their part. What goals would you like to see set for the next AGM in Dubai that can meaningfully move the needle on this issue in the next 12 months?
It's a great question. I think it's too early, though, to respond to that, because one of the things we need to do now is to reflect on the comments that have been made. As I said, we've had a very open and frank discussion at the Board of Governors. We need now to consult with a wider group of member airlines, which is a process we have already started, but we will be out talking to our member airlines on this issue, getting feedback from them, because as you will have seen in the presentations and the comments, the world is not moving at a single pace. Different parts of the world are moving at different paces. And for us, representing the global airline, we've got to factor all of that into account. So, we've commented on what's happening in the US, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. It's not the same thing. So we're going to try and pull all of that together. We don't want to leave anybody behind. We want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with the conversation as we move forward, because this is critical that we bring everybody together. It is a global problem. It requires a global solution, and we've got to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to participate in that. So I think what you can do is look forward to further and deeper discussions about this at the AGM in Dubai, but I think it'd be too soon for us to give you an absolute answer to the question you've asked.
Okay, we'll take a question in the middle. Tim?
Hi, Tim Heaver from Reuters. You've made the point very clearly that it's dealing with the energy transition involves a huge ecosystem of which you are only a part. But we did hear from the head of a major airline today who said, in his words, we have to do more than moan and groan and say it's not fair. So I wondered, appreciating what you've said, but are you doing enough proactively to lead this transition rather than just highlight the responsibility of others?
Yeah, I believe we are, because the first step in this issue is acknowledging the problem and acknowledging the scale of the problem and accepting the challenge, which we did at the AGM in Boston, when as an industry we came together and said net zero in 2050 is now the target. Now, I've been around and involved with IATA for many years. When we had agreed the previous target of a 50% reduction in net emissions, We had no discussion about how we were going to get there. It was just a conversation about we need to set a target, and we agreed on 50% net in 2050 because that was pretty much what everyone else was doing. That's not what we're doing this time around. Now there is a much more detailed debate, a lot of discussion. And that discussion is very healthy and very informative. And it's not about moaning, it's about the reality. You know, I said it very clearly when we agreed net zero in 2050. We were not, as airlines, going to be able to do that on our own. You know, and it was not good enough for everybody else to join us and say, yes, we agree. They need to join us and say, yes, we agree, and here's what we're going to do. And that's why we keep calling this out, because, you know, we do need everybody working together, everybody contributing, because it's not just about SAF. You know, we've said SAF is the single most important contributor to the abatement we will require by 2050. But we need a lot more than just SAF. SAF will be, based on our latest bottom-up analysis, 62%. We had said 65, we're now saying 62% of the abatement that we will have in 2050. So there's a further 38% that has to come from everything else. And that's why we're saying this involves much more than just airlines to achieve it. So I can assure you it's not about moaning or complaining. In fact, I found airlines doing an awful lot less of that this time round than maybe we would have had in previous times. You know, this is a critical issue. It's not just an aviation issue, as Mehmet says. You know, we're 2%. And we acknowledge that going forward, as others who have a more easy path to decarbonisation will mean that our contribution will increase beyond 2%. But we're 2%. And we're acknowledging that we have to do something about it. And as Mehmet said, we're the only industry that has acknowledged, as an industry, that we have to do something about it. And we're the only industry that has said we are going to get to net zero in 2050. Now, it's going to be bloody tough. You know, it really is. But, you know, you should be looking at us to say, well, at least these guys are acknowledging the problem, and at least these guys are determined to address the problem, and at least they're being honest in saying they can't do it on their own.
You said everything to be said. Thanks, Uli.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll take a question here.
Hi, I'm Vinod. France recently banned short-haul flights that operate within 3 hours. What is the IATA? How it will impact the airline industry, especially the low-cost short-haul flights operations?
So let me address France, because this is greenwashing at its ultimate. So what France has done is they have introduced restrictions which impacts on 3 routes from Paris-Orly only. Paris-Orly to Bordeaux, Lyon, and Nantes. You can still fly from Paris-Charles de Gaulle to Bordeaux, Lyon, and Nantes. So France has not banned short-haul flying. It appears that they're doing something. And what they're saying is there's a train alternative, therefore take the train. Eurocontrol has estimated that 40 daily flights have seen their routing increased by 370 kilometers each to avoid the strikes that are being caused by France. France is actually harming the environment because of their refusal to address the ongoing disruption that French ATC causes in France, which goes way beyond any reduction in CO2 that will be achieved from this ban on the 3 destinations from Paris-Orly. So France needs to be honest. If France is serious about addressing the environmental concern that they are saying they are, they should be tackling the huge disruption caused to aviation by the closure of French airspace with the ongoing strikes there. As an industry, we're calling for France to facilitate overflights of the country so that the rest of Europe is not disrupted by the strikes. That would make a huge difference to the environmental footprint.
Okay, we'll take a question on this side of the room in the front row. Yeah, the mic is coming on your left.
Hello, Andrea Schulz, FVW. Addressing Yvonne, we learned today, as far as SAF production till 2028 is concerned, a lot of places all over the globe, but Africa was still a blank map. So how is your perspective on that, and where do you see some achievements in Africa?
Well, that's a very good question. I think especially for African airlines, that's our biggest challenge. Where are we going to get SAF from? And in order we have the raw materials, whether it's the sun or waste or whatever. We do have the raw materials, but who's going to invest in producing enough SAF to meet our demands within the continent? So I think a lot needs to be done in terms of incentivizing investment in production of SAF. If that's not done, we won't find any, and the little that we will find will be extremely expensive for us. We're already paying a premium in terms of jet fuel in the continent, so buying SAF at ×3, ×4, that'll kill the aviation industry within the continent. So that's a huge dilemma that we're facing right now.
Okay, we'll take a question just behind. Yeah.
Hi, Laura Westbrook with the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. Question for Willie. How do you see China's recovery, and how does it tie into not only the aviation recovery but also the global economy? And secondly, especially given the continued closure of the Russian airspace, which is impacting some airlines. Thank you.
Yeah, so the positive news is the Chinese domestic market has recovered beyond where it was in 2019. I think from memory in April it was at 106% of 2019 figures. The domestic market in China accounted for almost 10% of all commercial aviation in 2019. In April it was about 11%. So you can see the domestic market is doing extremely well. The international market is still in a recovery phase, as is the whole Asia-Pacific region, but it is recovering, and we expect that recovery to continue. I think the single biggest factor that will play into China will be the closure of Russian airspace, as you say, because many airlines that would serve China cannot fly through Russian airspace, and therefore I think you'll see a great reluctance to add capacity from American and European carriers because of the extended distances that they're going to have to fly to serve China. So that is going to be a factor in terms of the pace of recovery for the international market in China. We have said, however, that from an IATA point of view, we did not expect China to open in January. In fact, our original forecast for this year assumed that China would open around now in the second half of this year. So it continues to be a positive for the industry overall. I think there are opportunities there. There are some questions about the overall Chinese economy, whether it's as strong as people may have expected. But what I can say from an airline industry point of view globally, China continues to be a positive for us in 2023, and I think that will continue into next year, into 2024. In relation to Russian airspace, we would like to see Russian airspace open to everybody. We would like to see the war in Ukraine end. We would like peace to return to the region. And I think we will only see Russian airspace reopen for everybody when peace is in that region and when the war in Ukraine finishes.
Okay, we'll take a question maybe just behind. Side.
Oops, sorry. Thank you. A question, Mr. Walsh, on Tanguy Guiménez with AFP, sorry. A question about single pilot operation. Do you see it happening anytime in the future? And is it a credible way with AI to fly a plane, 10, 20 years from now?
Well, I suppose the first thing we should say, we do have single pilot operations, but I think will we see single pilot operations on twin engine, short haul, medium haul jets and long haul? Personally, I don't. And the reason I say that is, the aircraft that are in service today and the aircraft that are being delivered today will continue to be in service for 20, 25 years. We don't see a single pilot aircraft being developed at this point. So personally, no, I don't. I don't expect to see it, to be honest, I don't expect to see it in my lifetime. So,
And you're as a pilot,
yeah.
you know that he's the pilot? Yeah?
I don't know if you do know this, but Mehmet knows this, but there's a very close connection between myself personally, but also my former employer. So Pegasus Airlines was actually started by Aer Lingus back in, the work started in 1989, and by a strange coincidence and not by design, I ended up being the pilot on the very first commercial flight for Pegasus Airlines back in April 1990. So strangely enough, I have a Turkish pilot validation that was issued to me on the back of certificate number 624, I think it was, but it's now out of date. I operated as the pilot on the very first commercial flight for Pegasus, and so Mehmet and I have a very close connection as a result of that.
All right, we'll take a question in the center.
Hi, Joanna Pluchinska from Reuters. Going back to the sustainability debate, there are more and more accusations of greenwashing against the aviation industry. What can IATA do, and individual airlines, what can they do to be more transparent about the efforts that they're making to improve their sustainability record? A lot of NGOs say that there are just a lot of targets and not a lot of substance in the debate.
No, I think there is a lot of debate, and I hope you would recognize, for example, we had discussions in the presentations today on non-CO2 impact, because, and it's important to reflect that these debates do happen. So any of you who have attended IATA AGMs over the year will know that we debate it on a regular basis. We're not shying away from this. We're not afraid to discuss our performance. In fact, we're very proud about what it is we've achieved. We are a contributor to climate change because we contribute CO2. 2% of man-made CO2 comes from our industry. We're not shying away from that. It's 2%. And as I said, we acknowledge that that 2% will probably increase as other industries decarbonize. Our industry is difficult to decarbonize. So I think we're being extremely honest with people. In relation to some recent events where certain ads being run by airlines have been challenged, I think it's important that everybody understands the need to be accurate and honest with consumers. And it's not just airlines ads who have been challenged. Many other industry ads have been challenged. But like everything, as Mehmet says, when it's to do with the airline industry, it tends to get a lot more coverage than other industries. So I'm aware of maybe 3, 4, 5 airlines who have had some challenges in relation to this. At IATA, we're encouraging our airlines to be honest, because I believe we need to be, but importantly, to be proud about what it is we're doing and to recognize that this is a challenge that we are facing up to and a challenge that we are determined to address. So we're happy to engage with anybody, debate with anybody. As I said, you witnessed the discussions that were taking place. I'm not sure there are, many people are aware that we're openly talking about the impact of non-CO2. And as I've said in every aspect of this debate, it's the facts that are important. They're absolutely critical. This suggestion that banning short-haul flying in Europe is somehow going to be the solution is complete and utter nonsense. Eurocontrol, you've heard me say this before, did a detailed analysis of all flying in Europe, and it's available on their website. If you stopped all flying in Europe of less than 500 kilometers, you would reduce CO2 from the industry by 3.8%. If you introduce the single European sky, which politicians could do tomorrow if they had the will to do so, not a single penny of investment is required from airlines. We've already spent the money. You could reduce CO2 by 10 to 12%. 3 times the CO2 reduction of stopping short-haul flying. And this is where people need to be honest. I think the industry is being honest. I think it's time for politicians to be honest and face up to what it is they need to do to make a difference in relation to this?
I think we have to be, as journalists, customers, people living in this universe, inquisitive. We have to ask. We have to ask. For example, there's going to be the Pegasus's press conference at 2 o'clock today here. Ask her what she's doing as an airline. Imprecise. If we do not ask, if we do not question, we can't learn the real facts. We have one globe, and everybody in this globe is living here. And our main duty for our descendants and successors that are going to take the world from us, at least give the world at par. And to be honest, to confess, the 50s and 60s born ones, we reduced something what we have received from our descendants and give it to our predecessors. You have to question us, not as an industry, but as a human being living in this world. Why you have done this, and what are you going to do? Willie said right. If you cut 500-kilometer flights in Europe, 3.5%. If you bring SES, 12 to 13%. Question your governments, question your countries. Why aren't you undersigning this? We have to do that. And as aviation industry, we are pioneering that. We take care of this globe. We don't have, so far as we know, another world to live. They're trying to go to Moon and Mars, but not yet. So we have to take care and clean our world.
Okay, next question. Okay, maybe we'll go back to Dina then.
We can go for lunch.
Maybe we'll take a couple more.
Hi again. There's been some efforts by individual airlines, such as Emirates and United, and I'm sure others, to set up funds that can invest in SAF. Do you see a possibility for a collective fund by IATA airline members under the IATA umbrella to pool together their resources towards investments in SAF?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and you know we've not made any move towards that. But I think the important thing about SAF is, if, for example, you had a single fund, it would suggest that we are going to invest in a single area. The beauty of SAF is you can build the plants to generate SAF everywhere and anywhere, and the technology that exists today is fascinating, but what will exist in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 15, is going to be even greater. So I think there's many different solutions to this. A lot of individual airlines are investing money in putting equity into some of these facilities to try and assist the financing of the building of facilities. And I think that will continue. I'm not sure that there's anything better that we can do collectively than we can do individually. So it is something we'd look at, but I think this is much more credible when it's the individual airlines, because what the individual airline brings when they're doing this is credibility to the scheme that then helps other investors, co-investors, to provide equity financing. And that's where I think the biggest hurdle is at the moment. So I'm not sure that if we did it at an IATA level, it would be better than that. It may actually dilute it. But it is something that we can look at.
Okay. We'll take maybe two last questions, one here, and that'll be it.
Hi, I'm Rafael Balago from Folha de São Paulo, Brazil. I want to ask you about how the airlines, especially Pegasus, can deal with the scenario of the dollar stronger than local currencies and the inflation in places such as Latin America and Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you. If you ask that question at 2 o'clock to our CEO, she will be happy to answer it for you. So here we are talking about the general issues of the aviation, but not the respective companies' issues. So there will be the last press conference at 2 o'clock. please join our CEO, Ms. Güliz Öztürk, and she will answer all of your questions.
Okay, then last question will be here.
Andreas Speth, German aviation journalist. Yesterday, Yvonne was on stage in some of the forums which were talking about this important topic of more females in aviation, and she was mentioning how she, the first time, walked into this room and started her career in aviation, and there were only grey suits. This time I see actually fairly many colorful dresses because there are more women are here, and IATA has been doing quite a big effort, I can see here, even compared to other AGMs, to push this topic. And but still we learned yesterday that only 5% of pilots are still only female right now, and I think now it's 28 or something of CEOs altogether. But can you give us some, your personal impression, Yvonne, but also over all the panel, your assessment or your timeline? What are you doing further to enhance the involvement of women in aviation, also in executive, but also in the cockpits? Thank you.
Wow, okay. I guess I take the woman question. As you said, Andreas, we are seeing changes. I think it needs to move a lot faster because we're starting from way behind. A lot still needs to be done, but as I mentioned before, we're aware that there's an issue as an industry, and things are being done to, especially with IATA, the 25 by 2025, things are being done to address that issue, but I think we just need to move faster. And it has to be a deliberate effort by individual airlines to address this problem. And it's not a woman problem, it's not for women to fix it, it's for all of us to fix it. Bringing in more pilots, it has to start right from when we go to the primary schools, high schools, because even what we're seeing now, the cadet pilots, even for our airline, very few young ladies are stepping up to become pilots. So we have to demystify this whole thing very early and get them when they're still young and groom them and train them to enter the industry. But it has to be a deliberate effort from an airline perspective. Yeah.
Okay, and with that, we'll close this press conference. Thank you very much
for
participating in this AGM, and please stay on for the Pegasus one.
Thank you.